With a massive Game 5 victory, the Winnipeg Jets may very well have just put themselves in pole position to advance to round 2.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Darrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we just finished a thrilling Game 5. It wrapped up in the wee hours of the morning, basically, here. Well, at least in my time, it's probably just a little bit before midnight or perhaps a little bit earlier elsewhere. But yeah, man, Game 5, what a massive victory for the Jets over the Blues. Obviously, a lot of us were probably a little concerned coming into this game because the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. This game felt like, for many reasons, one of the most important in recent Jets history. And I think for a lot of us, myself included, I wasn't necessarily doubting the team as much as I have in past playoff runs, but let's be real, right? There was a real risk that this team was potentially in danger of repeating some of the old history, but thankfully that didn't happen. And of course, what a statement win. But we're also going to have to talk about the fact that it probably has come at a major cost. Mark Scheifele went down early after the first period. He never came back. He was skating for a bit after some really big hits, so I'm hopeful that it's maybe not as serious, but obviously we're going to talk about how the team can perhaps adjust without him if they have to do that, and really talking about later on some of the rewritten narratives, right? This game, I think for a lot of reasons, had some big stakes, not just for the team and the city, but for each of the individual players. So a lot of stuff to talk about, but let's dive into the first, the Game 5 recap, right? What on earth was that game? Before we do, though, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now, like I said, Game 5, a huge statement win. Winnipeg really had all the pressure on them. You know, this Jets team hasn't won a playoff game after a playoff loss since 2019, which guess who it was against? The Blues. So, you know, for a lot of reasons, this game felt like, in my mind, one of the biggest in Jets history. You have had two really ugly playoff losses, playoff round losses in the past couple of years. You lost to the Blues too, and guess what they did? They went on to win the Stanley Cup in 19. So this game was a huge chance to really respond after two straight games of utterly terrible play, and Winnipeg did. What I think really stood out in this game was that a lot of guys stepped up in ways that you wouldn't have expected. Scheifele goes down after the first period, Nemesnikov gets moved up to the first line, and holy cow, I mean, I don't know what he was on tonight, but he looked like a totally different player. He scores the game winner. He starts doing some crazy stuff, had some really big plays late in the second half of the game, and I thought just looked like a very different player than he's been at 2C, right? At 1C, it was like he was reborn. So we'll see how long that lasts, but that's pretty awesome. Also came away really impressed with Dylan DeMello. He had a monster game, especially with Morrissey not really looking like Morrissey recently. DeMello stepped up in a big way and turned back the clock quite a bit. I came away thinking that his defensive work, his board clearances, and his assist on one of the goals tonight, awesome stuff. It's exactly what you want to see from a guy who, you know, this year did take a bit of a step back early in the first half, sort of recovered in the second half, hasn't always been at his best this season, but tonight he was pretty legendary. I know the analytics for him are going to look a little funky, but I promise you, don't necessarily read too much into the on-ice shot differentials and stuff. He had a really strong game. Also, gotta say, that performance from Kyle Connor, with Scheifele out, Connor stepped up in a huge way. Again, he opened the scoring tonight. But I think the bigger storyline with him is once Scheifele was gone, he really took flight on that line and was really driving the top line through the remainder of the game. So for a lot of the improvements that we've seen from him this year, I think that this was a really fitting outcome, reward perhaps is maybe the way to describe it after such an impressive performance. So really happy for him. Very good to see him doing super well. And that man, just a great performance from that line. The uniting of Perfetti and Iafallo together with Lowry on the second line, that was pretty cool. They had some really good shifts together. I can't lie. I came away thinking that I was like kind of wanting to see more of Perfetti and Iafallo together. That duo could be pretty tasty going forward. Perfetti, for his own efforts, was actually playing with quite a bit of edge. That Cole Fetty version of him was definitely there. He probably should have gotten a penalty for spearing tonight, but apparently the refs were putting some of the whistles away at times. Very interesting officiated game. And I don't just mean that for the Blues and the Jets. I mean, it was just, some puzzling no calls, some puzzling calls. The officiating the series has just been kind of like, it's hard to even know what a penalty is for both teams. So, yeah, pretty crazy stuff. If there's a big overall takeaway, I think the most important thing was that the Jets, especially from the moment that Scheifele went down, really started to take over this game and basically shut the Blues down. I think the scoreline's going to look a little just because Helly had one really bad muffin, and right at the end of the game, there was a bit of a garbage time goal. And unfortunately, the third pairing really got victimized on that one. They were just really bad tonight. Schenn and Stanley just kept really struggling to clear the puck out. I really just want to see Colin Miller at some point. I don't know why they don't want to play him. I think in these upcoming games, especially if Scheifele's out, you really need more mobility on the back end. Even if Scheifele's healthy, Miller should just be in. The guy is really important. He's a very good player for this team. And that Stanley-Schenn pairing, man, yikes. You really have to worry about them. Every time the Blues had some really dangerous chances, it was probably because Stanley Schenn was on the ice. And it's not like they're even using Stanley that much. He played, only a handful of minutes. And so if you don't even trust him to put him out there for much of the game, more than 10 minutes, it just feels like a wasted roster spot. But, that's sort of a topic for tomorrow, perhaps. In the meantime, though, huge win. This sets up a critical Game 6 on the road. No road team has won in this series so far, so I don't quite know what to expect in Game 6, but we'll talk about that probably a little later this episode. Maybe the biggest point of concern, though, of course, is Mark Scheifele. That is a really tough injury, and if he is set to miss any time, the Jets might have a really uphill battle. It does kind of leave a little bit of a dour note from this game, and we haven't really had a clear update on the nature of Scheifele's injury. Montgomery just said something to the effect that he was convinced it was the Roddick Foxa hit, which was the second one, and not the Schenn hit, which was the one that got penalized. I've seen a lot of folks saying the Schenn hit was clean on St. Louis's side. It wasn't. I mean, it was an interference, and Schenn actually leapt up into the hit, right? It wasn't head contact, but it was a bad hit. And you saw at the start of the second period, Arneal absolutely ripping into the officials. Monty was too. It's just not a good situation. So something to really, keep an eye out for. Obviously going to be a tough one, especially if Scheifele is slated to miss time, but we'll talk about how Winnipeg can maybe try and cope with that in just a brief moment. But before we do, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where the heck all your money went? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy than ever to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on not only food delivery stuff, but also streaming services, subscriptions. It's frustrating, right? And Monarch Money can help you collect that all together, figure out what's coming in, what's going out, and can even help you set financial goals to maybe start trimming some of that some of that spending down and start actually saving some cash. And of course, you don't have to juggle multiple apps. It's all in one place, so you never have to worry about downloading a ton of stuff. And if you've got a partner or spouse, there are shared features so you can make sure that you're always on the same page with your significant other. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about, obviously, a tremendously huge Game 5 win, super gutsy, really important, not without cost, though. This game, unfortunately, may have hurt the Jets in the long run. Mark Scheifele went down after, a couple of really big hits. Schenn kind of leapt into a hit after the puck wasn't really on Scheifele's stick anymore. And, to me, it was not that dissimilar from, was it Hagel, I think it was, on the Barkov hit. It wasn't a boarding and it wasn't quite close to the wall, but it was a really not great hit. And then Faksa later had a clean one in open ice. It was, I don't even recall if it was like a slightly reverse hit or something, but it was a pretty stiff one. Scheifele, after that, he did take a couple of skates after that, but then second period didn't come out. Montgomery gave his thoughts that it was the Faksa hit that knocked him out. Arniel actually did respond and said, I don't know that, I don't know when Montgomery got his, medical degree. So clearly there is some stuff going on here. We'll see how it sort of pans out. And, we don't really have a clear update on the timeline for Scheifele yet. I'm sure that there's probably going to be some testing. I will say that it's not super comforting that he wasn't able to return to the game. My hope is that because he was able to skate afterwards, after the hit, maybe it's not super serious, but if Scheifele is slated to miss a couple of games here, that does change the complexion of Winnipeg's roster arrangement pretty significantly. Now, assuming that this new line of Connor, Nemesnikov, and Velarde does what it did in this game, maybe it's not as big of a concern for the next two games. But, going forward, Scheifele is, whatever you can say about him, there's no questioning that he is a really pivotal part of this offense. He's important at 5v5. He's important on the power play. It is going to be really hard to have him missing for more than a couple of games. But if he is, I would assume Gustafsson probably draws back in. You're going to see quite a few elevations of your centers. Lowry probably now is your de facto 2C, Nemesnikov on the first line. Your 3C, I would like to see Morgan Barron get the shot. Barron, I think, has just consistently looked really good. In fact, I really wouldn't hate seeing Barron higher up in the lineup, but I know that the Jets probably won't do that. My guess is he will just become 3C. I don't quite know how that's going to work with some of the wing pairings, because typically when they move guys around, usually they still like to keep some level of consistency with their line combos. And if the Lowry line, somehow gets scrambled, I just don't know what that means for like Niederreiter and Appleton. Maybe they still keep that line with Lowry together. Maybe Barron gets a look at 2C. I don't know. The alternative that you could think about is either one of Velarde or Perfetti, maybe moving back down the middle. I don't think it would be Velarde. Velarde just came back from injury. He hasn't played center in like forever. Perfetti's probably the closest one, but I don't think that that's really going to be their solution. My guess is they'll probably do a pretty basic swap here. Keep it not super complicated. Line 4, maybe they go with like Gustafsson down the middle. I don't really know who else would be able to do it other than maybe Toninato. You could look at that, but my guess is it's probably going to be Gus. So assuming that happens, the Jets are going to be stretched a little thin. Game 6 is going to be a very high intensity, high energy thing. I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets actually lose that game. As great as this Game 5 win was, I think, when Winnipeg goes on the road, the splits haven't been kind to them in the series. So, maybe the Jets can pull off a huge win. I think that would probably be the best outcome. Let everyone try and heal up for round 2. But that's a tall order. St. Louis is a lot like Winnipeg in that their home ice just seems to be a real fortress. It is tough to crack them on the road. So I'm not going to think too much about Game 5 or Game 6 yet. Obviously, it is sort of looming on the horizon here for the end of the week on a Friday. So, I do have to think about it in the very near future, but at least for the next 24 hours, going to try and not stress about it too much. The Jets just came off a huge win. We're really hoping that Scheifele's injury isn't long-term. Some illusion maybe from some of the players that perhaps it is a little more serious than we'd like, but again, we don't know. They haven't done the testing yet. We don't have a clear picture. So we'll have to wait for updates probably sometime tomorrow at the earliest. I don't know beyond that. It's going to be a little bit of a tricky situation. Arneal hasn't really indicated that Scheifele is going to be traveling yet, so yeah, it's not the happiest moment, despite such a critical win. But this is one of those next man up things, right? I think the Jets have always had that mentality this year. They have come through some really tough adversity before, and the season has not been easy. They lost Sandberg and went 500ish around that time. It wasn't enough to stop them from winning the President's Trophy, so hopefully Scheifele going down for any amount of time isn't enough to sink what has been a really back and forth playoff series. I think the one bit of good news is that Winnipeg's game tonight against St. Louis at home was really driven 5v5, right? Yes, the Jets did have some power play opportunities, but for the most part, the power plays really weren't that impressive. It was really even strength where Winnipeg made hay. So if there is kind of like a silver lining, I think the Jets playing such a good even strength game is probably the biggest takeaway, right? Winnipeg defensively, I think, played a lot more like they've done in the past. The only exception, probably that third pairing, which we've spent a lot of time talking about in the past. But otherwise, the Blues really didn't have too many good scoring chances elsewhere. So, next man up, this is going to be a dogfight all the way to the end. If the Jets can find a way to squeeze out a huge road win here, that would be fantastic. But, assuming that it does go to Game 7, the good news also is that, it'll be on home ice, right? And if Scheifele has to miss Game 6 and Winnipeg falls, at least they could have him potentially back on Sunday if he's ready to go. Really, again, hoping that it's not serious and long-term. Even a couple of games would be a really tough situation for the Jets. And if they do advance to the second round, obviously, you want Mark back for that. You need him back against a team like either Colorado or Dallas. Right now, Dallas is up in the series, so something to keep an eye out for. But yeah, in the meantime, Game 6, we'll have to see, hoping that Scheifele's okay and good to go. If not, Nemeshnikov, first-line center, let's see some of those fancy moves he showed against the Blues in Game 5. Still laughing about the attempted zone entry where he did a spinorama. I don't know where that confidence came from because he hasn't been doing that for much at all this year, but glad to see him feeling himself a little bit. Looks more like the Nemeshnikov of last season. So, this team has made it through some pretty crazy stuff this year. One more situation obviously isn't helpful, but they've made it this far without Ehlers and Velarde for, stretches. So I guess that they can make it without Scheifele, but also some good news on the Ehlers front. He is skating in a non-contact jersey. It does sound like he's still a little bit of a ways away. So, he's not going to be a help for Game 6 or 7, but at least in the interim, the Jets are starting to heal up. Just have to hope and pray that Scheifele is in that category. But, amidst all of this, I think, if nothing else, right, there's some really good narrative rewriting. Not for everyone and not for every moment, but, in some of the biggest ways, the Jets came out of Game 5 answering a huge question about what this team really is, right? I said last episode that Game 5 could be a referendum on what this franchise is deep at its core. And, we've spent 15 odd years building this franchise at, up to this point. The front office has assembled what it believes to be a real contender. We've had, a good run or two here and there, but outside of that, not a lot of recent success. And so Game 5 was a chance for the Jets to prove that this season was going to be different. And they did. I want to chat about what narratives they've rewritten so far and what remains for them to sort of polish off here, not only through the remainder of the series, but should they advance through the rest of the playoffs in just a little bit. Before we do, though, did want to let you know about our friends and partners with the Amazon Fire TV Stick. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. Obviously, I play FC 25, so EA Play is great, and if there's a way to not only avoid having a console, but to be able to merge it with a streaming service, that is awesome. And that's really what the Fire TV Stick 4K does. It takes away the need to have an Xbox or a PlayStation. It makes your console basically a small little device that you just network to your TV, and all you need is a compatible controller. You don't have to flip through, multiple devices to find the exact one that you need. It's all in one spot, and it is so convenient. It's got low latency technology to make sure that your connection is always strong and stable so that you have fast, responsive gameplay. Now, if you're ready to get started, head to amazon.com/FireTVLockedOn to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are just wrapping up with talk about the Jets rewriting big narratives. It has been something that I think a lot of us have talked about on and off throughout the past couple of weeks and really some of the past couple of games. And, after games 3 and 4, I don't think I felt as bad as maybe previous seasons because I did feel like at home the Jets have been really almost unbeatable. And, the Jets have usually responded after some pretty serious adversity. I will say my confidence was taking some real big hits because the way that the Jets lost in those 2 games echoed too many things that we've seen before in previous years. But Game 5, finally, the Jets won a playoff game after they lost one. And I think that that's a really important thing, right? It's really a big weight off the shoulders for the Jets to finally be able to answer one of the biggest criticisms about this team is that a lot of people have said that they're soft and that they cave. I think Top Line, their podcast on the previous day was talking about how the Jets ultimately folded like a cheap tent. And it was hard to really argue with that, especially in the moment. You take a step back, you look at the series, and at the bare minimum, at least it was still tied 2-2, right? But Game 5, a lot of pressure, and after those Game 3 and 4s, you wondered, would Winnipeg have the willpower and really the desire and drive to come out swinging and show that they were the better team? To do that, all without Scheifele for 2/3 of the game, I think is really not just rewriting the narrative, but basically giving the narrative the finger. This team, I think, has risen above some really serious problems. And look, eventually this stuff does run out, right? You can only outrun some of your significant losses for so long. But in the moment, you needed to get to 16 wins to get yourself to the cup. And for the Jets to come out with not only one of their strongest second periods of the whole postseason, but really an incredible, mixed up lineup doing all of this against a Blues team that, sure, maybe has already won a cup in the past couple of years, but is still hungry for more, I think is really important and really impressive. Winnipeg basically shut the Blues down for 40 minutes. They didn't let them have too many opportunities, barring a couple of big ones, probably from the third pairing more than anything. But other than that, the Jets played a pretty darn complete game. And I think it's just a real testament to what they're all about right now. And the fact that this year really is different. I said last episode or maybe another previous episode that what they did in the regular season for me earned them more of the benefit of the doubt than previous playoff runs. And so far, it seems like that's starting to be rewarded again. So really hoping that continues. As far as the players are concerned, Hellebuyck, this game was a really big one for him. He was better in some ways. He did have a really ugly second goal that I think probably doesn't help his case. The third one, not his fault, right? That one was kind of on the defense, just sort of switching off and going to sleep. The first one, that was a tipped goal, a bit of a problem for the Jets this postseason. I don't know what to even say about it at this point. I already kind of covered it the previous episode, or the one before, the crossover episode, talking about how I think it's really a systems thing and really a stylistic problem more than Hellebuyck just being bad. But all that said, his save percentage hasn't really looked great this postseason. He did in this game have an absolute robbery on a shorthanded chance. Sundqvist is probably going to be seeing this stick save in his nightmares. So yeah, I mean, for whatever happened in, the second goal against or whatever, Helly made a couple of big crucial saves, so we're going to say that he is at least starting to edit parts of his narrative, even if it's not quite there. Kyle Connor, part of a top line that has traditionally been considered a no-show in the postseason. Tonight, that top line, even without Scheifele, really shown impressively well, had the game winner and just really balled out in a way that we haven't always seen with them, especially in the playoffs. So I'm going to say that they've rewritten their narrative positively, and I would also apply that to games 1 and 2. I thought they were very good then when Scheifele was healthy and Iafallo was back there, so big ups to them. Really good stuff to see. Elsewhere, I think the Jets have heard some real criticism about whether or not they've actually had any depth scoring. Tonight was a depth scoring kind of night, right? Nemesnikov getting on the board with the promotion, Niederreiter getting a nice tip deflection, DeMello contributing to that goal, and, just a lot of hard-working efforts all across the ice. Lowry actually got on the board on an empty netter, which is awesome. He also had DeMello getting a goal, which is great. So, actually, apologies. I think I said DeMello assisted on the Niederreiter one. That one was Sandberg. DeMello actually just had a goal himself. They've credited him with that. So, fantastic stuff for him. Appleton getting a couple of points after some odd shifts from him. He had a very interesting night where I thought he didn't look that impressive, but then later in the game, he had a couple of big shifts, had a couple of good passes and plays, and managed to figure positively in the end. So, interesting evening from him, I guess. But all told, I think the biggest thing for the Jets is that they just really stood up and showed that they can be, a team that even amidst all the adversity, amidst all of the noise, rose above that and delivered a really crucial game. So super happy about the result. A little concerned about the Scheifele injury, but amidst all of this, Winnipeg is still got a story to write, and I think that that's the biggest thing going forward. How they finish the story, how they finish the narrative, I can't tell you how it's going to end, but I do feel like Winnipeg is maybe turning a page. This is a big response after some bad games, after some really ugly playoff droughts over the past couple of years, where you win one game in the first round and then you're out in the next 4. So this I think is a really good response. I'm very glad that we've seen it. Still a lot of work to do. This is only the first round anyways, so even if the Jets advance, you still got a ton of work to do before you are on to the Cup Finals. But look, in the moment, you've just got to enjoy it. And I think that that's what I'm going to do. We've got the day off today, and then we've got game 6 tomorrow. So as always, man, it's going to be a thrill ride. We'll have a recap probably at some point on Friday, if it's early enough. It's going to be a fun game. 7 p.m. start time, my time, 6 p.m. for all of you local. Big road game. Let's hope that the Jets show up and put on a really big road performance and come away with a big series win. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here tomorrow with Jets coverage of Winnipeg versus St. Louis on the road. But like I said, that's all the time that we have today. See you then. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.